I'm making a video about this particular kind of transmission. This is a Muncie 319 transmission, and this is basically a 3-speed manual transmission with electric overdrive on it. And they made these transmissions from about the early 50s to the mid 60s, and it's basically the same as a Muncie 318 transmission. The only difference is, of course, the Muncie 319 transmission will have the overdrive tail shaft. Both transmissions will have essentially the same main case here. The only thing is on the Muncie 318, it's not going to have this, the electric solenoid here, which kicks it into overdrive when it's energized, the lockout lever, and the governor, which engages the overdrive after about 28 miles per hour. And these are good transmissions, as long as you don't put them behind anything real powerful. Anything about 350 or less horsepower, they'll do fine. And there are a few maybe bad points you can say about these transmission. One thing that's not too desirable about this transmission is that it does not have a synchro in first gear. Second and third gear they have synchronizers, but first gear doesn't. So what that means basically is if you're cruising and you're coming to a stop, and let's say the vehicle is still rolling and you want to put it in first, if that vehicle is still moving and you jam it in first, it's probably gonna grind a gear. So generally, I guess back then what they recommended was to just make sure the vehicle comes to a complete stop, and then you can then put that transmission in first gear. And then of course once you start going down the road and you start putting it into second and third gear, it'll go in smoothly, because once again second and third gear are synchronized. And this is called the R10 overdrive on the tail shaft of this transmission right here. And they've actually used these electronic overdrive units for many years. They actually started making them back in the 30s on quite a few different vehicles, not just GM vehicles, but they also put them behind, Fords, Dodges, the old Studebakers, the Packards, and it was, an option you had to, like if you could just, basically all you have to do is energize the solenoid and it'll kick it into overdrive. And of course, as you're going down the highway, that's going to reduce your RPMs, less wear and tear on the engine, and also save you some gas. And that's why I actually initially got this transmission, because it's, with my current vehicle right now, it only, it's a 3-speed automatic. I was going to put this transmission in there since it has overdrive, so that, once I'm on the interstate, you can go cruising without so much, revs, So, but then after I did quite a bit of research, I did, kind of like discover that this transmission can't quite hold up to the power I'm going to put it behind. I'm actually going to put it behind a Cadillac 500 engine. And so I've decided to put a different transmission behind there. And so anyway, this is the M319. The only thing you got to be aware of also with these overdrives is that you never want to engage it while the vehicle is in reverse, or even rolling back. So you originally, like I said, these transmission came with electronics, and then the way it was originally wired is this solenoid, this governor it's basically a switch, and then after about 28 miles an hour, it would connect power to the solenoid and then kick it into overdrive, just to make sure you don't have it in really that's the only time you need overdrive is when you're at higher speeds. And you can engage this overdrive at any speed, really. You can be in first gear going slow down the road, and then if you energize the solenoid, it'll kick it into overdrive, and it'll kind of like feel like you're going into second, but automatically. And then when you shift into second gear manually, it'll feel like you're in third. And then when you shift into third, it'll kind of like feel like a fourth gear, I guess you can say. And but generally, you would, like me, I was just gonna put it on a switch on the dashboard and then energize it when I'm going down the highway, and that'll give me lower RPMs and really not use it at the when I'm at lower speeds. But anyway, the original electronics, they would have gauged it at 28 miles per hour, and then and this lever right here, is in case you don't want it to go into overdrive, you know, on the dash you had like a lever that you can actually pull it in case you don't want to go into overdrive and lock it out. And there's actually situations where you do not want this transmission to be in overdrive, particularly when you're going down a hill or you're going down a mountain. When this transmission is engaged into overdrive, the vehicle is going to be, I guess you can say, freewheeling it. It's going to be like it's not connected. So like if you're going down a mountain, you know, your vehicle will continue to accelerate. And then, of course, you'll need to use your brakes to slow down, and you won't have any engine braking. So, you know, in that situation, what you want to do is disengage the overdrive and let the engine do the braking. So you're not burning up your brakes and whatnot. You can use engine braking. So that there's one point where you would not want to use this overdrive is when you're going down a hill. It'll the vehicle will freewheel. And so that they had a lever and a cable here, so in case you wanted to lock it out. And one thing you also got to know is that if you ever use this kind of transmission, it's like, let's say you do want to take it out of overdrive, and if you de-energize this solenoid, but I guess you can say you're still giving it gas, it won't disengage, because you know it's putting torque behind this overdrive, and it won't disengage until you let off the pedal a little bit, and then then it'll pull out of overdrive. So the way these things were originally wired is that you actually had a relay that would momentarily, maybe for half a second, disable the coil, so that when you decide to, or when you kick it back out of overdrive, it'll momentarily stall the engine, thereby allowing the overdrive to pull out. And then originally it was also wired, you had a switch on the gas pedal, and let's say you wanted to pass somebody, you know what I mean? Of course you would step on the gas hard, and then the electronics would automatically disengage the overdrive. Of course, you don't want overdrive when you're trying to pass somebody, and then that relay would momentarily stall the engine so that it would kick out of overdrive, and then boom, you would get that higher RPM to accelerate, and then once you kind of let off the gas just a little bit, it'll automatically kick back into overdrive again. So that's basically how it works. And there's kits online, like if you want to get a wiring harness, the relay and whatnot, to wire this up. There's actually some kits online you can get to wire this up, the way it was originally intended. Or, like me, I was just going to connect this overdrive solenoid to just a regular toggle switch on the dash. But the problem with that is that if you ever forget that you have it in overdrive and you accidentally put it in reverse, you're going to ruin this here R10 unit, and then it's going to cost you a pretty penny. If you're lucky, if you could find another one, you're going to basically mess up the bearings inside the planetary gears on this overdrive unit, and that can be very costly to repair. It's probably very hard to find parts for these, to rebuild these nowadays, so just be aware of that. Also, another thing about this transmission, once you put the bell housing on here, from the bell housing all the way to the end of this transmission is actually the same length as a turbo hydromatic 350 automatic, you know what I mean? So what that means is that it would probably be a pretty easy swap. Let's say you wanted to, convert to a manual transmission, and you want to go with a TH 350. Take out the TH 350 and put this manual transmission in there with the overdrive in its place, which is nice. It would be a pretty easy swap because it's about the same length as a plus. It also has the same tooth count, so you can reuse the same slip yoke that went into your TH Hydromatic 350 transmission. It'll fit just the same in this transmission. So just a little bit of information there in case you ever wanted to use, convert to one of these by chance. Of course, that would be the easy part. The hard part would be obviously finding a clutch pedal, getting your flywheel and clutch, and maybe probably moving your cross member that holds the transmission, as it's probably in a different position. And of course, all the odds and ends, the shifter assembly, and a bunch of things. It would be a little bit of you know, it's not exactly easy converting over to a manual transmission. But anyway, this is a good transmission. You know, there's nothing wrong with these. And I've noticed a lot of people mistake this kind of transmission for a saginaw transmission. This is not a saginaw transmission. You know, a saginaw transmission came later, the 3-speed saginaws, and they don't have this 4-bolt access plate. You know, they'll have more bolts on it, and then these 2 shifter points are spread further apart on the saginaw transmission. So anyway, this is not a saginaw. This is a Muncie, just so you know. And so there it is. And so I got this transmission with the original intention on using it, but then, you know, I did a lot of research and found out that it's just not strong enough, because I'm going to put it behind a Cadillac 500 engine, and you know, those engines, they just make a whole lot of torque, and then I'm boosting the engine, so it's going to be even worse. So I'm actually going to go ahead and use this old top loader transmission I got sitting here. I've had this sitting for many years, and you know, this is just a regular 3-speed transmission right here. And but you know, I don't know if you know anything about top loaders. They're one of the strongest transmissions you can put behind a high horsepower vehicle. And so I'm going to be using this. And if you know anything about top loaders, you know that they usually come in Ford vehicles. But this particular top loader came in it actually came in a Oldsmobile 442, 1967 442, and that's because back in you know, the mid 60s, as engines started getting bigger and more powerful, you know, GM realized, hey, these Muncie 3-speeds here are not gonna cut the mustard anymore with these more powerful muscle car engines that started coming out in the mid to late 60s. So I guess GM called Ford and said, hey, we need you to make us a bunch of 3-speed transmissions that can handle the power. And so they actually put these Ford top loader transmissions in GM vehicles from the mid to late 60s, you know, in Pontiacs, Oldsmobiles, Buicks. And so anyway, I'm going to be using this because, you know, you can get these 3-speed top loaders for pretty cheap. You know, a lot of times people don't want them because they're 3-speeds. You know, the 4-speeds, of course, are much more popular, and they want a lot more money for those. And so I'll just be using this. The engine I'm going to put it behind has a very broad, wide power band. So, you know, a wide ratio 3-speed, in my opinion, is not really going to hurt it. Of course, don't get me wrong. Of course, I'd rather put a 4 or 5-speed in there. I even got a T5 sitting around, but you know, those T5s are real weak, and I'm definitely not going to put that behind no Cadillac 500 engine. So I'll be using this, and I'll be using this bell housing right here. This is a BOP, you know, Buick, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, and Cadillac. They have this bolt pattern right here, and you can see for the transmission mounting, you actually have the dual pattern right there, and this here bell housing will actually mount to this kind of transmission, a common GM. This is your common GM mounting right here. This is real common on, you know, Chevy, GM vehicles, which has the holes further out, and then these holes, which are more vertical, I guess you can say, are for the top loader transmission. So that I was kind of lucky right there that I could use a top loader with this kind of bell housing, which I'll put behind a Cadillac. This is actually the bell housing that came on this Muncie 319 transmission. It's for a Chevy, you can see. And it only has the mounts for a Chevy only type of transmission. It won't, you know, this won't mount behind a top loader. So I believe this one came off a Chevy 327. So anyway, there you go. Just thought I'd talk about this particular transmission. I'll probably keep this around and maybe put it in one of my other vehicles that has not so much torque behind it. And so thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.